So we'll begin. Usually when we start, once we've gotten together and we're starting our practice, we do a purification practice, which normally with this temple bell, and then I ring it. I wanted to talk about that a little bit and just some of the rationale behind it. It's really important in this practice, or it's a key in this practice, that we are focused on compassion, that we begin with compassion, we end with compassion. It's really like establishing kind of your true north in your heart when you're coming to meditation. So we are trying to cultivate compassion, loving kindness, goodwill towards other people, generosity, appreciative joy, and peace and equanimity. Come over here, honey. Sit by Dad. Good girl. So that's a very important part of the practice, and this is also a way of looking at what we call mental purification. So when we sit down to meditate, we cultivate these positive feelings. So I have a couple of things that I wanted to share with you. First is the Metta Sutta. And so just invite you to close your eyes. I'll read the words of this for you, and you can let yourself feel it. May all beings be happy and secure. May they be happy-minded. Whatever living beings there are, feeble or strong, long, stout, or medium, short, small, or large, seen or unseen, those dwelling far or near, those who are born or those who await rebirth, may all beings without exception be happy-minded. Let no one deceive another, nor despise any person whatever in any place. In anger or ill will, let them not wish any suffering to each other. Just as a mother would protect her only child at the risk of her own life, even so let us cultivate a boundless heart toward all beings. Let your thoughts be of boundless loving kindness pervade the whole world, above, below, and across, without obstruction, without any hatred, without any enmity. This, they say, is divine abiding here. And then to take it a little further, the Vatapama Sutta suggests that we extend our loving kindness, radiate our loving kindness in 6 directions. So again, I'll read and you can just feel this. One abides, having suffused with a mind of benevolence, one direction of the world. So you might begin by just feeling yourself projecting this loving kindness straight ahead, just straight ahead from the direction that you're sitting. So that is suffusing, a mind suffused with benevolence, sending that in one direction of the world. Likewise, the second direction. So now you could project it towards the back in the reverse. And likewise, the third direction. You could have that be to your left. And likewise, the fourth direction. You could have that be to your right. And so above, we project that loving kindness above, upward. And so below, we project that loving kindness downward. So suffusing the world in all 6 directions with loving kindness, one abides the entire universe with benevolence, with a mind grown great, lofty, boundless, and free from enmity and ill will. So with that, those wonderful intentions established, I'll sound the bell. Let there be peace. Let there be peace. Let there be peace. Wonderful. Thank you so much. And what I've got, I should probably hand out a few things here. Those first 2 suttas that I read to you, I printed those on a sheet of paper so everybody could have a copy. So I think they're really beautiful. And then there's another sutta, which I'll read a little later today, that is also on here. So after we do the meditation together, we'll hand that out, plus the handout from last week as well. So for now, why don't we take a minute to get comfortable for a meditation practice. So however you'd like that to be. And remember, if you feel chilly, there's blankets in the closet and there's extra cushions. You can reconfigure the room, move things around if you want to. It's fine. Lots of cushions. So as we get ready to meditate, just a few things that I usually remind us of is that we look for some symmetry in the body because it helps us to sit without discomfort. So having both sides of the body doing pretty much the same thing, whether we're sitting or laying. And then if you're sitting in a chair, if your feet don't make solid contact with the floor, you can put them up on a bolster or a cushion or a yoga mat. That way you're not extending your toes and kind of putting strain on your calves and feet. So just a way to relax. And if you're sitting, we sit with the back relatively straight but not rigid. Sometimes I share an image of if you imagine that you are a lotus flower and that your sit bones and your legs are the roots and they are embedded securely in the sandy bottom of a lotus pond. And then your spine is like the stem of the lotus flower coming up from the bottom and coming up to the surface of the water where the leaves and the flower are floating on the surface, and that would be your head. And so there's sort of if you picture that, there's a natural drawing up of the spine, of the head, and there's a fluidity to that, a flexibility to it. So we can approach our posture with that same attitude. And then we'll close our eyes to eliminate visual distractions around us, things that make us think. We'll breathe through the nose if we're comfortable with that, comfortable doing so. Breathe through the nose, otherwise breathe however you'd like to. And then just place your hands in a way that is comfortable. So we'll begin with this meditation. I'll sound the bell. And just to remind everybody too, if you need to adjust your posture as we go through this, that's perfectly fine. Don't feel like you have to sit in discomfort. Feel free to move if you need to. So I'll sound the bell. So just begin to follow the bell into silence. Let that silence draw your senses inward. It becomes a natural, welcoming invitation to become aware of what is happening within your body and mind. We find that we're able to let go of the habit of the mind, which is to be projected outward most of the time, engaged with the outside world. Instead, for this time, we direct our senses inward. We become aware of the feeling of occupying our own body. There is a feeling to just being present and being aware of that presence. So let that fill up your consciousness, that feeling of being here. There's a natural peacefulness and stability. Having observed that, having opened up to it, let's bring our awareness together up to the top part of the head and to the area of the scalp. And here we will begin to observe any physical sensations that are present. So as we do this, there's nothing that you need to be finding or shouldn't be finding. You're simply opening up your awareness, focusing on the scalp, and taking note of any sensation you encounter. And so oftentimes those sensations will show up as temperature, feeling warm or cool. Sometimes those sensations show up as air movement. Sometimes they'll show up as just a little tickle or an itch or a tingle on the surface of the skin of the scalp. And so what we do is, with awareness focused on the scalp, we just observe as these sensations arise, pass away. They arise, they last for a few moments, change into something else. They come and go. And so observing this impermanence of the sensations, it helps us to remain objective. They're just coming and going all the time. There's no need to cling to any of them. There's no need to push away any of it. We just observe the constant flow, sensations arising and passing away. And as you're observing the scalp, you might also notice that there are places where there is tension, muscular tension in the scalp. This is very common. If you discover tension, you can just let that go. So it's not a rejection of the tension or a disliking. It's just more of a, oh, I noticed this and I don't need it at this time. So we can release that tension. And we discover there's a feeling of freedom and peacefulness, relaxation as we do that. And we continue to observe our sensations, still within the scalp. And this is the process we use, a very simple process in the body scan. So now from the scalp, we can draw the awareness downward, feel it moving. Sometimes it's possible to feel that awareness actually moving from part to part, like a soothing, warm flow, almost a fluidity. But feel as the awareness moves down into the forehead, as it expands through the temples. You'll feel it moving down through the eyebrows and into the eyes. And so here again, we'll just focus on the naturally occurring sensations. Temperature, air movement, sensations on the surface of the skin. We remain objective because these sensations are continually arising and passing away. So there's nothing here that we need to latch onto and say, this is a permanent part of me. We just watch. And as you observe these parts, you can look for tension in the forehead. Sometimes the brow is furrowed or the eyebrows are raised a little bit. So you can let that tension go. Sometimes there's tightness in the temples, or sometimes the eyes are squinted a little bit. So anytime we notice this with real compassion and kindness, we just give these places of tension, we give it permission to leave the body. Not a rejection, not aversion, just, oh, here's tension. This is not needed at this time. I release you. I release you. A very soft and gentle process. And now, from the temples, you can start to guide the awareness downward toward the ears. Now that we have an understanding of this process, we observe, we let go of tension, we continue to observe. I'll just start to name different parts of the body and we'll flow through together. And you can just follow that simple practice. So moving awareness into the ears, feeling that flow of awareness. And then from the ears, let that awareness flow forward. It starts moving into the face and passing through the cheekbones, You're aware of all the different sensations. Sensations arising and passing. From the eyes, you can observe as awareness begins to flow downward through the bridge of the nose, down through the nose and lips and mouth and chin. Observing all of these different sensations. Noticing their impermanence as they arise and pass. And then if there's any tension you notice, again, we just let it go. Let it go with real compassion, with a feeling of goodwill. Releasing that tension the way we might release a butterfly that we find trapped. We might cup it very gently in our hands and carry it outside, release it into the trees or into the garden. In the same way, we release our own tension with great kindness, great compassion. So now, looking for tension in some of these areas like the jaws, if your teeth are clenched or your lips are pursed, any tension in the face, let that go. And then we'll begin to guide the awareness downward again, down through the chin. Feel it moving down through the neck, into the throat. Observe the throat and then the sides of the neck. All the subtle sensations. Observe the back of the neck and let the tension go as you discover it. Sometimes there will be areas where we really don't notice tension, we don't feel it, but it can be helpful to go through the process of releasing tension anyway. And then we find that there actually is an increased peacefulness in these areas. So let the tension go in the neck. And then from here we can let the awareness flow downward into the shoulders. Let it spread outward through the shoulders, through the shoulder blades. And with the shoulders, depending on how we're sitting, if we're sitting against a chair or laying down, we might feel a sensation of contact between the shoulders and the surface that we're leaning against. You might feel a sensation of bearing weight, or sometimes there's just a little sensation of the contact between your skin and your clothing. So we're opening up awareness to all of these subtle sensations, releasing the tension, letting the shoulders drop. And then from the shoulders, we'll move our awareness downward into the upper arms. And we'll feel that flow downward from the shoulders, moving into the upper arms. And then we'll focus for a moment on the biceps, the front part. Observe the sensations there. And sometimes if there's no real obvious apparent sensations, you might notice a very subtle feeling of energy or pulsation on the skin. So this is helpful. Be open to even the most subtle sensations. And then rotating inward from the biceps to the inside surface of the upper arm. Just follow that same process, observing, letting go. And then rotating to the back part of the arm, the triceps. Again, observing, releasing, and then rotating around to the outside part of the upper arms. Observing sensations coming and going, arising and passing. And then feel as the awareness flows down through your elbows, moving through the elbow joints. Feel it moving downward through the forearms, downward into the wrists. Sometimes you'll notice that there's a very pleasant, soothing flow of awareness. That the movement of awareness in our bodies is a pleasant experience. something that brings us peacefulness. And moving down through the wrists, we feel the awareness spreading into the hands. From the hands, we begin to observe the different parts, the heels of the hands, how their sensations are different from the palms of the hands, how their sensations are different from the tops of the hands. And then we move through the thumbs and the fingers, observing. And then finally we can bring our awareness into the fingernails, the tips of the fingers, and just spend a few moments here observing sensation. Sometimes you'll notice a very subtle sensation in the fingernails, just almost a feeling of energy, the energy of being alive in the fingernails. And so we observe. And then from the fingernails, we'll move our awareness upward to the top of the chest. And start by spreading awareness across the collarbones and then letting it flow downward through the chest. Just moving part by part all the way down to the base of the sternum. And then from there outward through the rib cage. Try to stay attentive to the sensations as we move. Sometimes as we progress, it's easy to kind of go through the motions and forget to observe the sensations. So try to stay attentive and aware. From the rib cage, you can move the awareness up into your underarms. And then from there, we'll guide it down through the sides of the body, all the way until it reaches the waist, observing and letting go. And then from the waist, bring the awareness forward into the belly. And begin to observe the belly, what happens as you observe it. Sometimes there's a rising and falling with the breath, or sometimes an expansion and contraction. Sometimes you'll notice the feeling of your skin and your clothing moving together. Again, all of these sensations can just be objectively observed. And if there's tension anywhere in the belly, and there so often is, just let that tension go. Let the belly be completely free and relaxed. And continue to observe. Now, from the belly, we're going to move again, this time around to the top of the back, starting at the base of the neck. And we'll begin to move the awareness downward into the shoulder blades, through the upper third of the back. Once again, just observing. These are the sensations in the body at this time. Noticing what they are: temperature, air movement, contact. Sometimes there are sensations of maybe fatigue or discomfort. Try to remain objective, continue to observe and release the tension. Moving down into the middle third of the back, repeat that same process. And then you move a little further down into the lower part of the back, observing, letting go. Sometimes in the back, because it can be an area where many of us hold pain or real tension or discomfort, sometimes it can be difficult to observe those sensations objectively because pain doesn't feel very objective. It can also be difficult to let go of tension around those areas because it feels like tension is helping you protect yourself from the pain. But one thing we find in the practice is that we really do have an infinite degree of awareness, and that it is expansive beyond this physical body. And that if we become aware that yes, these are some of the difficult sensations in the body, here in the back, but we can give them as much space as they need to be just as they are. We don't have to hate them or reject them. Just let them be as they are. Just allow that to happen. Allow space around these sensations. When we do that, we find that it's often easier to let go of the tension around them as well, because they are less emotionally charged. So we can let go of the tension, we can allow these sensations to exist in this expansive awareness, which is really infinite. We find that we can begin to free ourselves from the pain and the discomfort, really by just accepting, by allowing what is true to be, without trying to resist it. Now, from the lower back, we can bring the awareness downward further. Feel it as it moves through your sit bones, feeling a bearing weight there in the sit bones, moving through the hips, moving throughout the rest of the pelvis. Again, all these different sensations arising and passing away, some lasting for longer periods, some lasting just for a second. Just observe impermanent sensations, not worth being attached to, not worth generating animosity towards. From the pelvis, we can direct the awareness downward into the thighs. And we divide up the thighs into a few sections so that we can observe carefully, starting with the top surface or the uppermost surface of the thighs, from the hip all the way down to the knee joint. We can observe the sensations, release tension, rotating outward to the outside surface of the thighs, again from the hips down to the knees, observing, letting go. The observation is a very important part of this practice, because what we're doing is bringing objective awareness to the sensations over and over. And we create a new habit by doing this. As opposed to saying good sensation, bad sensation, I like this, I don't like that. We're letting go of the I, and we're just saying this is the sensation in the present moment, objectively. So moving through the thighs, looking at the underside of the thighs now, and rotating to the inside surface of the thighs, observing with objectivity and releasing tension. Let the awareness flow through the knees. Let it flow down slowly through the calves, through the shins. And feel it moving through the ankles, slowly downward toward the feet. And then with the awareness in the feet, we can look at different parts and notice how the sensations are different. The heels have one sensation, the soles have another, the balls of the feet have another, the tops of the feet have a different sensation, the toes have yet another sensation, the toenails have another sensation still. So in this one part of the body that we call the foot, we discover that there are multiple sensations existing, arising and falling. So there's really no permanent, stable entity that we can call the foot and say that it feels this way, because it's made up of all kinds of other different sensations and parts. But having moved the awareness through your body in this way, for a few breaths, just embrace the feeling of the entire body. Just breathing in. Feel that you're breathing in through every pore in your body. Feel that you're breathing out through every pore in your body. Breathing in, there's a full body awareness. Breathing out, there's a full body awareness. We find that this is very calming and soothing. And this is the part of the practice that is called samatha, which means calm abiding in your own body. And from the feet now, from the whole body, let's bring our awareness again just back to the scalp. And at your own pace, you can observe the scalp for a moment. Maybe breathing in, observe the sensations. Breathing out, releasing the tension that you discover. And then just moving from there, part by part, downward. Using the breath as a tool for inhalation and awareness, exhalation and release. Moving downward, notice that there are parts of your body where you released the tension a few minutes ago and it has returned to some degree. Maybe you loosened up your jaws and now they're tight again, or your shoulders, maybe you let them relax and now they're shrugged, or the belly has become tight. And this happens quite regularly, quite habitually, when we have difficult experiences, or we're just running a little late, or we're stressed out, or we're angry. All of these different emotional experiences we have manifest as sensation in the body. They manifest as tension in the body. It is not possible to have one without the other. And what we discover is that the tension in the body starts to replay the difficult emotions that cause the tension. So it creates this cycle, perpetuating this self-perpetuating cycle of tension, difficult emotions, causing tension, causing difficult emotions. So every time you notice a place of tension in the body, you can release it. You can be aware of it as you release it, and in that way you will begin to change the habit energy of the mind. From one that is grasping pain and discomfort to one that is continually setting you free. So moving your awareness through your body in this way. Now we can bring our awareness up to the base of the nose. There's a little patch of skin there beneath the nostrils and above the upper lip. There's also the rings of the nostrils. You can bring your awareness to them as well. And then there's also the nasal passages. Bring your awareness to them as well. So now as you breathe in and out, be fully aware, attentively aware of the movement of the breath, of the movement of respiration. So that breathing in, you are aware that you're breathing in. Breathing out, you are aware that you're breathing out. Stay with that awareness of the movement of the breath, breathing in, breathing out. And as you do this, try to stay with the breath for its full duration. So as you breathe in, the air starts, it slows down, it pauses, it reverses direction, and then it becomes the out-breath, which in turn it begins, and then it slows down and pauses and reverses direction and becomes the next out-breath. So we observe that continuous movement of the breath. As you follow the breath for its full duration, you might become aware of sensations of touch within the nose, within that triangular area. You can open up awareness to those feelings of touch as the breath passes through and over. You might become aware of some subtle sensations within that touch. Like when we breathe in, the air can feel cooler, or it can feel drier. Compared to when we breathe out, the air can feel a little warmer and a little more moist. So you're aware of these sensations. Awareness of the movement of the breath, the touch of the breath, and the sensations of the breath. And just letting yourself be completely focused on this. Focus on the breath. And at some point, you might be observing the breath, and then you'll notice that a distraction has come up. You'll hear a sound maybe, and that'll pull your awareness away from your breathing. But in the moment you notice that, this is a wonderful moment because you are paying attention and you're seeing the distracted nature of the mind. So in that moment of noticing, all you need to do is guide your awareness back to your nose. And then you can kind of reestablish the awareness, reaffirm, okay, I'll be aware of the in-breath and the out-breath and its full duration and its touch and its sensations. Maybe you can only do that for another breath and then another distraction comes up, but that's okay. This is the practice, and over time, you will remain focused for longer and longer periods of time. And sometimes it's possible for distractions to come as strong physical sensations. You might feel a little ache in the knee or a little feeling of discomfort in the back, or it could be any physical sensation, but this can distract us as well, pull us away from the meditation. So if you notice that this kind of a distraction has occurred, follow the same process, which is to just gently guide the awareness back to the nose. Just gently guide it back. No conditions. Return to the breath. You find that those sensations in the body just kind of take care of themselves. They are, after all, impermanent. They are all, after all, changing constantly. And sometimes we'll find that we're distracted by things like thoughts. We're just remembering something or planning something or thinking about something we want to do. And we'll discover at some point, oh, the awareness has moved away from the breath to follow these thoughts. And again, in the same way, just return the awareness to the breath. Each time you do this, you strengthen your awareness and you strengthen your ability to be able to refocus on the breath, letting go of all of the emotional baggage around the distractions. So you're just going to become more and more free. So it's helpful to meditate in this way, just focusing on the nose, trying to remain focused on each in-breath and each out-breath, and being aware when any kind of distraction arises, so that you can release it and return to the breath, strengthening your practice. This is what's helpful to do over and over again. So for now, let's just take a few minutes together in silence. We'll do silent meditation together, following the breath in the way we described. And in just a few minutes, I'll sound the bell to end the meditation. Good job. Good job, everybody. Take a little time. There's tea in the kitchen if anybody's interested, or if you just want a cup of hot water to warm up, but that's all in there, so feel free to get some of that if you would like. And we'll take a minute to just kind of get back into the body. Move the big joints around. And continue to extend compassion and loving kindness towards ourselves, which is so helpful. I find the more that I do that practice, here's an interesting thing that I can tell you, is that when I got into the meditation practice, pretty deeply, I started to read about how compassion was important, loving kindness was important, appreciative joy and equanimity, and that it wasn't just about us feeling that way, but it was about us wanting others to feel that way and having that intention and having sort of that aspect of your heart being the thing that guides you. And so I was kind of resistant to that for a few reasons. Some of the stuff was based on the type of business and work that I was doing, and I sort of felt like I needed to maintain a level of kind of, a hard kind of a shield or a shell around me and this kind of a thing. But I kept, I was mindful of this, and over time I just started to say, okay, I'm just going to take a chance and see, can I throw out loving kindness kind of indiscriminately and not feel like I'm being victimized. And I was just so pleasantly surprised as I started to do it, that the more I practiced these loving kindness techniques, just the better and better I felt. And I felt like I started to have wonderful connections with people that maybe I never normally would have. And it just started to change everything. So I guess what I learned from that in my personal practice is that the reason I wanted to hold off on some of that stuff is because I felt like it would make me too vulnerable and maybe, too susceptible to getting my heart broken or to being disappointed. But what I discovered was it just made me feel stronger and stronger and stronger. So once in a while, you'll be throwing out loving kindness and compassion, and maybe that doesn't get reciprocated in a way, or maybe it doesn't get returned. Sometimes people, they're going through tough stuff, and so you don't get anything back. But for the most part, it's just been incredibly rewarding. And then as I read further and further into the different teachings and the suttas, I found more and more references that, this is where you need to just be. This is your anchor spot. Compassion, loving kindness, appreciative joy, equanimity. And as long as you focus on that, you can't go wrong. So I had, as I said, the full sheet of paper with those two teachings on it, and then there's one more on there. So thank you, Joni. Mm-hmm. And then this is the handout from last week that I'm not sure who has. I know Brenda and Abby won't have it. I don't know if you got that one last week. There's enough to just go ahead and have another one if you'd like, though. There's tons of them. So.
Thank you.
I usually, nowadays I'm printing a couple dozen, and then I hand them out on Sundays, and then I hand them out on Tuesdays, and then the extras just go on the table out there for people to take as they would like.
I think you gave this one out last Sunday.
Okay, did I do the big full sheet of paper?
No.
Okay, good. Yeah, that was something I wanted to do.
But I'll
Thank
look
you.
at it and then I'll give it back for Tuesdays.
Okay, thank you. So, before we get into, there's the last section on the full sheet of paper, the Upajjhatthana Sutta, which is translated by Thich Nhat Hanh. Before we do that, I just thought I'd review a little bit. We've been doing this series called The Least You Need to Know, and we've been talking about different truths regarding the human experience of suffering or dis-ease, what its cause is, what things lead into that, and how we can get ourselves out of it. And so to just review kind of generally, the first truth is that there is this experience of what is called dukkha, and dukkha means, it's often translated as suffering, but it means a whole range of things, from feeling agitated, uptight, panicky, dissatisfied, depressed, just kind of that whole range of difficult human emotions. That's the experience of dukkha. And so we all experience it at different times and in different intensities. It's just kind of a lifelong thing. It's not the only thing we experience. We experience love, we experience happiness and joy, and we have fun. But the thing that we all have in common is that this feeling of dukkha, in one of its manifestations, it always seems to kind of slide back in and infiltrate our consciousness enough so that we feel like, yeah, we're to a degree afflicted by this stuff. Like it's a real thing, and it really takes away our joy. So looking at this and recognizing this as an objective truth is not pessimistic at all. Sometimes people read this and they say, well, that sounds like kind of a downer because you're saying everything is depressing. And we're really not saying that. We're saying that everyone has experiences of dukkha, of depression, of dis-ease, of unhappiness, of fear. Everyone has those. And so what the practice sets out to do is figure out what's causing that. And if we can figure out what causes it, it'll give us some insight into how we can end it. And then from there, we can move into happiness. So this is a really, actually a very upbeat teaching, because it's like if you went to the doctor and you had a pain in your stomach and you were worried about it, the doctor examines you and says, oh, okay, well, here's what the cause is, and now that we know that, I can give you, this antibiotic or this medication or something like that, and that'll take care of the problem. So it's very much like that. So we're really looking at ourselves with objectivity and saying, yep, I have this experience of dukkha in my life. The second truth is that dukkha has a specific cause. That cause is craving, clinging, and aversion. So one way you could look at this is to say, okay, if you close your eyes and just imagine you're perfectly content. Let's just say you're sitting on a beach somewhere, it's just beautiful weather, you have a book, you're just comfortable, you feel safe and secure in every possible way. You've had plenty of good food and you're healthy and everything is going perfectly. So you're at this place of just complete contentment. Well then, let's say that a thought enters the mind, I really want this. I want to go to the bazaar area of this town where I'm at. I want to look for stuff to buy. As soon as, even though it's just a really minor thing, as soon as you start to have that wanting experience coming up, it begins to interrupt that feeling of contentment and ease that was once there. So it's as simple as noticing, when I don't want anything, I feel pretty darn good. When I want something, well, then I feel a little agitated to the degree that it might get me up and make me go get it. So this makes sense biologically too. If you wanted, let's just say you're sitting content and you feel hungry, but there's really no drive to go get anything to eat, well, then you're going to be complacent and you're not going to do it. So you're going to remain hungry. But the wanting mind comes in and it tells us, yeah, you got to get up and get some food. And you're not going to feel satisfied until you do. So, craving, clinging, and aversion. Wanting things to be different than they are. Wanting things that are happening to stop that you don't like. The things you don't like, you want them to stop. And then, so that's craving, clinging, and aversion. And we shortened up those three, which normally come together, craving, clinging, and aversion. We shorten them up and are just using the word attachment. We're saying dukkha is caused by attachment. So that's wanting, not wanting, clinging. So then the next question is, why attachment? Why is this the problem? And we got into a teaching on ahankara and mamankara, which means I-making and mind-making. So as soon as we start to personalize these things and add in the I want it this way, I need it to be this way, a lot of times this is just a convention in the way we've learned to speak and relate to the world. But in this arising of a strong sense of I and me and mine, this ahankara and mamankara, this attachment intensifies. And along with that, the suffering that we experience along with that intensifies. There's a, let's see if I can find it. I'll read a little excerpt. Something. Bear with me. I organized all my papers about 3 times before the class, and I think I just organized them a little too well. So they're gone. There's a very important text called the Dhammapada. Dhammapada means the way of truth or the path of truth. And I want to read the first few verses for you. What it really points out is that the suffering we experience is generated by this ahankara and mamankara proliferating. So really focusing on me and mine and I and all those wants. So the Dhammapada, it starts off like this. The mind precedes its objects. They are mind-governed and mind-made. To speak or act with a defiled mind means to draw pain after oneself, like a wheel behind the feet of an animal drawing it. So what this is talking about is that every experience we have, the mind is preceding the experience by saying, I like it, I don't like it, I want more, I want less, I want to get away from it. The mind is constantly telling us, I want this, I don't want that. And so this is the normal way the mind operates. The second verse, the mind precedes its objects. These objects are mind-governed and mind-made. To speak or act with a peaceful mind is to draw happiness after oneself, like an inseparable shadow. So the first thing is you're drawing like a heavy cart, a heavy burden, is the way it's depicted in the first one. The second one is to speak and that's with a defiled mind. And to speak or act with a peaceful mind is to draw happiness after oneself like a shadow, which is effortless. There's no burden to a shadow. So what it says is that people who are kind of focused on this mindset where they say, I have been insulted, I've been hurt, I've been beaten, I've been robbed, Anger does not cease in those people who harbor this sort of thought. I've been insulted, I've been hurt, I've been beaten, I've been robbed. Anger ceases in those who do not harbor this sort of thought. Notice how the opposite of a defiled mind in verse 1 is described as a peaceful mind in verse 2. In the suttas, defilement is not a moralistic term, but it refers to something that clouds or impairs our ability to see things clearly and as they really are. So, one of the things that I really work on in my own practice is, like everyone else, I'll run into these interpersonal interactions or relationships, and things inevitably happen that will kind of hurt our feelings or make us feel slighted or make us feel bad. Aware of the fact that when I dwell on that and say, oh, this person did this to me, and she said that to me, and this hurts my feelings, just doing that is like adding fuel to the fire. You're keeping that going. But if you're able to let go of that, peacefulness starts to fill in that spot. It's been a very interesting experience for me in my personal life to see this work again and again. So it's a real thing. It really does work. Just trying to let go of that self-identification, letting go of, sometimes I look at it as we have a mind that is waiting for an opportunity to be offended. And it's like we're almost kind of always on alert. Who's the next person to offend me? What's the next thing that I'm going to see that's going to offend me? And when we're looking like that, we'll find a whole bunch of things that will, in fact, offend us. But if we just are willing to start to let it go a little bit, like water off a duck's back, we find it's much, much easier to deal with it. So then we got into last week's teaching, talking about the three characteristics that, because there's this intense focus on I and me and mine in attachment, we can also look at these three characteristics that underlie all of that, and this will help us to further understand it. The three characteristics, and I often phrase them in different ways, just to give us different perspectives of the same truth. But the three characteristics, I've listed them as impermanence, impersonality, and imperfection. Or sometimes they're listed as impermanence, non-self, and dukkha, that word again for suffering. The third truth is that dukkha ceases when attachment ceases. And as we begin to penetrate this feeling, we really start to feel free. Meditation practice shows us that this really works. So that's helpful. So the first thing, impermanence. Did I tell the story about King Solomon last Sunday? Probably not. There's this is from the Jewish tradition, from the Torah. King Solomon, of course, was one of the great kings during that time. He had a minister, kind of an upper-level minister in his kingdom that was starting to get pretty popular, and King Solomon started to feel a little threatened by him. This guy he thought he was just getting a little too big for his britches, and so King Solomon was looking for something to maybe take him down a notch or two. At about that same time, King Solomon was told that there was this magic ring somewhere in the kingdom, and that the owner of the ring, if you had the ring, it would make a sad person happy and a happy person sad. So King Solomon wanted this ring. he wasn't quite so sure that it actually existed, but what he decided to do was to have this minister go out and find it and bring it back to him. And he gave him 6 months to do it. So this minister went far and wide, all different corners of the kingdom of King Solomon, looking for this ring, asking people, no, I've never heard of such a thing, I'm not aware of it, I'm not aware of it. Well, the 6 months were starting to tick by, and he was almost out of town, or out of time. And then in kind of desperation, he stopped at a bazaar where there were, poorer vendors and things like that. And he found an old ring vendor, this old man, who was making rings. And so he stopped and he said, have you ever heard of this ring that will make a sad person happy and a happy person sad? And the old man, the ring maker, said, wait right here. So he went back into his workshop area and he started working on this ring, forging a ring. And so it was a plain gold band, this ring. And on the inside, he inscribed 3 syllables in Hebrew. And so he gave it to this minister. The minister took it back to King Solomon's palace, and King Solomon had arranged for a great banquet in celebration of this ring, thinking that this minister wasn't going to bring it, so it was like he was going to set up this big party and then the minister would be humiliated. So he said to the minister, as they're all getting ready for their big meal, he said, so can you present us with the ring? And he said, yeah, I have it right here. And he gave it to King Solomon. And King Solomon picked it up and he looked at it, and the smile vanished from his face. And the inscription in the ring, the 3 syllables in Hebrew, they translated as, this too shall pass away. And so that was the words that would make a happy person sad and a sad person happy. And so it was kind of an interesting thing to tie that in, that old Hebrew story or Jewish story about impermanence. And that if we become aware of impermanence, that there's really 2 sides to it, that impermanence doesn't just mean that, there's like, we get older and we get sick and then eventually, life comes to an end, and so there's impermanence. There's certainly that truth, but then there's also that, there's difficult things that happen, and so having the wisdom to know that this too will pass away, it gives us the ability to hold on and to be strong through those difficult times. So impermanence is very important and very helpful. It teaches us. The other thing impermanence teaches us is to really appreciate what is beautiful and what is wonderful in our lives now, even if it's something minor, like I'll see squirrels outside eating, and it's squirrels, but I'll see that and it's like, well, that's a neat thing, that's a squirrel, I see that. Or I saw, it was some restaurant. I went out to lunch with a friend a few days ago, and there was just a mom who brought a little toddler in there, and she was feeding the baby, and it was just like, well, there's that. So I'm seeing that. That's an impermanent thing. It really helps. Or with my daughter who's 26, she's growing up, and life changes, and she'll be moving to Uganda in another month now, and so it's like aware of this impermanence. It makes things more special to us, and it also helps us to tolerate the difficult things. In regard to impermanence, so on that full-size sheet of paper with the 2 suttas that I already read, the ones that are around loving kindness, and kind of setting our intention in that way, there's one more on the bottom that I think is really helpful, and this is around impermanence. And so this is from the Upajjhatana Sutta, And this one's translated from the Pali by Thich Nhat Hanh, who many of you are probably familiar with, a wonderful Vietnamese Buddhist monk teacher. The translation of Upajjhatthana Sutta means subjects for concentration. And then it's also frequently called the Five Remembrances, probably most often known by the Five Remembrances. And so this was one that the historical Buddha said to his, the people that were following him, whether it was monks or nuns or just lay people, householders, he said, recite this every day and really feel it, and this will be helpful to you. So it's about impermanence. I am of the nature to grow old. There is no way to escape growing old. I am of the nature to have ill health. There is no way to escape ill health. I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. There is no way to escape being separated from them. My actions are my only true belongings. I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. My actions are the ground upon which I stand. So what this is really asking us to do is to look at the impermanent, transient nature of human existence, to accept that, difficult things happen with the body, difficult things happen to our loved ones and our families. And so what it's saying is to really make a point of appreciating these wonderful things as they occur, but also to appreciate the fact that you are impermanent and you are of the nature to grow old and have ill health and eventually pass away. So make the most of every minute because of this impermanence. And then the last thing, really important, my actions are my only true belongings. So what this is saying is, so what you choose to do with this is what makes the difference. I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. They are the ground upon which I stand. So that's so important to be aware of that, so that you can just work within that truth. Kind of snoring over here. So then, so we got through the rest of the handout from last week. We got through it down to the bottom of page 3, just at the heading imperfect. So that's where we're going to pick it up again. But just before that, that Robert Rabin quote, I'll read that to you because it's really beautiful. A tremendous knowing comes effortlessly into the mind when it falls into silence, when it gives up trying to understand, when its reel of stored images no longer projects abstract pictures onto the clean screen of simplicity. This kind of knowing is transmitted to us as pure revelation, as a clarity untouched by words or other symbols of meaning. When we allow this knowing into our minds, our very lives become as clear and startling as this knowing. Really like that quote. Just about letting go. Knowing comes effortlessly when the mind falls into silence. So that's really part of our experience of meditation. So this third characteristic is imperfection. And the way I feel is, I'm imperfect, and so is everything else, and so is everyone else, and so I feel like I'm in good company. What imperfection really refers to is that the things we try to get in life, the things we crave, won't quite do the trick. Not for very long, not permanently. I've heard it said that the secret to life is not in getting what you want, but in wanting it once you get it. And you'd probably have a hard time naming one thing that you really wanted and consequently acquired that brought you anything close to the satisfaction you thought you'd get from it. And sometimes the things we crave and then acquire become the source of clinging or attachment. According to one of the suttas, attachment is like hot pan meat. And I love this image because it's kind of nasty, but it's like hot pan meat. If you've dropped a piece of tender meat into a hot iron pan, you know it sticks, and then if you pull it out with a fork, it just kind of tears it apart. That's talking about attachment. That's the way attachment feels. And it's really true. There's like this motivation to compel us to do these things through attachment, but then the result is this pain or this tearing away. Gandhi said, in the attitude of silence, the soul finds the path in a clearer light, and what is elusive and deceptive resolves itself into crystal clearness. So I like to ask then, what is your relationship to imperfection? So many of us have such high demands on ourselves. We're so much perfectionists. We need to do everything just right. Sometimes we're perfectionists about the other people around us, wanting them to do everything just right. But coming to terms with imperfection is really one of the characteristics of existence. So this is like one of the laws of nature. Well, then allowing that to be true, it's liberating. It sets you free. I accept the imperfection. So everything is impermanent, everything is impersonal, everything is imperfect. And if you allow that to unfold as it really is without resisting any of it, you find that your experience is just much, much easier. Non-attachment is not the elimination of desire. It is the spaciousness to allow any quality of mind or thought or feeling to arise without closing around it, without eliminating the pure witness of being. It is an active receptivity to life. So not the elimination of desire. Not the elimination of desire. Because desire in and of itself is not a problem. Most of us who came here today, we had a desire to feel better. You all right there, Lou? And yak up some breakfast? She's okay. We came here with a desire to try and feel better. Well, that's a wholesome desire. There's nothing wrong with that. Came here with a desire to learn some things that might be helpful tools and techniques for us to navigate through life in a way that makes us feel better. So desire is not the problem. If you came here and said, all right, everything's riding on this today. I need to find the answer and it better work. Well, then that's attachment, and so there can be suffering there. So it's to be aware. Not all desire is bad. A lot of desire is good. I have a desire to want to, help people. I have a desire to want to tell my kids I love them. I have a desire to, all these things. These are wholesome desires. Not all desire is attachment, and not all desire is problematic. So being aware of that, I think we can also find greater peacefulness. That's about where we are at the end of that teaching.
Can I throw something in about the perfection?
Please do.
Sometimes I think people use this perfectionist thing about kind of as an excuse to not really try or do something.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a book, a series called The Artist's Way by this Julia Cameron, and it might be for people who are writing or music or art or anything. And the thing I really got out of it is it says, don't be afraid to do things badly. because that's how you get better. Don't be afraid to do it badly, to write badly, and then you get, I mean, you're only gonna get better if you do it. And it might be badly, at first. Same thing with meditation, same thing with music. I mean, anybody who's really, really good at things has not always been really, really good at things, so.
Right.
It's just that I gotta keep that in mind, like,
It's true.
you try it, maybe you don't wanna continue with it for 5 years of playing guitar, but at least try it, if you want to. You know, people will say like, oh, I always wanted to. Well, do it.
Yeah, I can't think of too many things that I'm good at that I was good at when I tried it for the first time. You know, it's like very few things. It's, you know, some people they seem to be a natural at certain things, but, you know, for me, it's like most of the stuff I tried, no, not so good. But I felt like, oh, I enjoy this and I think there'd be benefit to it. So, yeah, I agree. Are you familiar, any of you, with this? It's called wabi-sabi. It's kind of a Japanese aesthetic. It is, I'm trying to think of the little phrase they use. Well, maybe that'll come back to me. But what this wabi-sabi aesthetic is that things that are old and used and imperfect are more valuable and more beautiful than things that are brand new. You know, for example, I've sometimes used the example of I've got some old shovels out in the garage, and I've also got some new ones, and the new ones have these yellow fiberglass handles, and they're really bright and, you know, all that, and they're new. And most people would want the new one. But then I've got these older ones where the shovel itself is rusty and some dents are there, and the handle is just this weathered wood, and, you know, but it has a beauty. It possesses a beauty, this wabi-sabi, that the brand new yellow fiberglass shovel doesn't have, you know. And I even see this with people. Sometimes I see, you know, we're so youth oriented in our culture. It's like, okay, the young people are the beautiful people. You see these black and white photographs of older people, and it's like, wow, how beautiful. You know, just the all the wrinkles in the right place, and the gray hair, and the eyes, and, you know, the way an old person's fingers look, and all these kinds of things. It's sort of embracing this real intrinsic beauty in what is imperfect, and it's kind of a neat thing to think about. It's something along the lines of nothing is perfect, nothing is finished. I'll have to fire that up so I can share what that is before we leave, because I can't remember it. It's kind of a neat thing. But that's the wabi-sabi work aesthetic, and it's really a neat thing. Comes from Japanese culture. One thing, for example, is many Japanese people will buy one scissors, and that'll be the only scissors they buy for their whole life. And compare that to us. I mean, I've got like 12 Fiskars laying around this place, you know, and they all wear out. But they have these old metal shears with the metal handles and things like that, and, you know, it's like there's beauty to that. All right, let me just look up wabi-sabi real quick here. Pardon me.
Sometimes it's like the perfection is in the imperfection.
Yes.
And that's kind of what makes it perfect, is that it's not perfect.
Yep.
It's like,
Wabi-sabi. Yeah, sorry about this,
it's okay.
but it's kind of neat.
Well, that's weird that that's loud all of a sudden.
The
We didn't hear it at
wind
all
check?
during. We didn't hear it at all during.
So Yeah, so it is, nothing is permanent, nothing is perfect, nothing is finished, is one way to look at it. So in that tradition, the Zen monks, if they have a cup, a ceramic cup for drinking tea, they break that cup. When they repair the cup, they use a glue that is just a completely opposite color, and they fuse it back together. And so they consider the broken cup that's been repaired as more valuable and more beautiful than it was before. So that's kind of another example of that wabi-sabi ethic. But it's kind of a neat thing. You might want to learn about it, read up on it. So we're getting close to the end of our time. I just wanted to mention that I'll be sending out the new newsletter in the next couple of days. Reiki practitioner training starts next Saturday. That's an all-day class, so it starts at 11 a.m. and goes till 6. But we'll be going through, and people will be certified level 1 Reiki practitioners from that. And we'll also be doing Reiki level 2 the following Saturday. And then on Saturday, March 17th, we're going to do the Mindful Kids Initiative, where we do the snow globes and the coloring, and so that's also available. And yeah, so I think those are just the two things I wanted to mention that are upcoming. So they're in the newsletter, but if you'd like more information, you can always ask me too. We're really excited about it. So, and why don't we close with just another moment of compassion, another moment of cultivating love and kindness. And we do this over and over, and we find that more and more it just becomes where we are. You know, this is where our heart starts to resonate. And you'll start to see it show up in some really, sometimes surprising, but just beautiful ways. Just beautiful ways. So, aware of the suffering experienced by other living beings, it is our deepest wish that all beings could be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And may all beings be surrounded by real love and kindness, just complete love, complete kindness. May all beings be joyful and happy, and may all beings be equanimous, which means without attachment, without craving, clinging, and aversion. So just peaceful, free, equanimous. And then may all of you sharing the room and the time, I appreciate you so much. I appreciate being able to share these teachings with you. Thank you for coming, and may you all be truly, truly happy. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Ken.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Yep. No need to rush off. Feel free to hang out if you want. Yeah, really enjoy starting a Sunday that way.